Hello everyone, Reza here. Welcome to another Marvelous Designer video. In this video, we are going to focus on a simple hat. On a surface, it looks like an easy object to make, but a lot of tricks will go into the process and into making this hat. So again, another excuse for me to share new tools and tricks with you. So it's going to be hopefully an exciting lesson. Let's get to it. All right, as usual, we are going to start with our beloved reference. So that's a type of hat that I'm trying to make. It looks like a baseball hat, to be honest with you, but again, it falls into a unisex type of hat as well, a day-to-day regular hats as well. So few things are common amongst all of these photos that I found. So let's go through them and see what we should consider when we create the hat. Now, the first thing that catches my eyes is the eyelets, and these eyelets are basically on every single reference of mine, so I'm planning on incorporating that into my hat. Of course, there are some design decisions, stylistic design decisions that you can use to make one eyelet stand out. Definitely your call. Another visual consideration is this button on the top that again all of these hats have in common. So definitely this is something that I would like to have in my own design. Another thing that I noticed is there are certain patches, not for all of them, but for most of them there are actually 6 patches that create this top section of the hat. So again, something that we need to be mindful of when we need to create actually 6 separate patterns and then stitch them all together. The brim, the way that it's connected to the top part is, if you notice here, it's not basically covering only 2 patterns. It actually goes beyond of those 2 patterns, a little bit from the left and a little bit from the right. And surprisingly, that's the case for all of them. The reason I'm saying surprisingly, because I personally didn't know that until I started doing research. I always thought, all right, that's going to be just one patch and the brim is connected to one patch, but that's not the case. For example, this is another different style where instead of having 2 different patterns, we have one big pattern, whereas in here we have 2 separate patterns, but again the brim goes beyond those 2 patterns. One last thing is the way that the stitching works. So you can see we've got multiple stitches, 3 in 1, 6 in some. So up to you how you would like to approach the stitching. For example, 4 in here. If I look here, we've got 6 in here. So different offsets, different number of stitches. Also the color of stitching, I noticed that is very close to the color of the hat, something to be mindful of. Again, these are all the common decisions. You can always deviate from that and make your design look more stylistic. But if you're aiming more common design that people can relate to, then that's why we're looking at references, just to not to go too crazy with our design. Of course, you may draft your own design or create your own style, which in that case, it's a different story and you can completely deviate from all of these considerations. All right, I'm just going to move that aside and let's start with the application. Here I am inside Marvelous Designer. Let's bring in our male character. I'm just going to go male base mesh. And again, these are, I've already talked about those decisions already. I'm going to bump up the dimension a millimeter to cm so the scale looks correct. if this sounds a bit weird to you, definitely make sure to check my previous videos. I think it was the very first video actually that I talked about importing a mesh. Now, before I even start with the 2D pattern window, just the way that we approached adding buttons and top stitching, so on and so forth, I would like to make my fabric to begin with. So anything I make after this point will be from this fabric that has had ticked on. So I'm just going to call this hat MTL for material. I'm going to pick a color, I don't know, maybe green. You can change this to whatever color you have in mind. Obviously, if you guys want to sample the color from any of these guys or your own design, you can definitely do that. For now, this is something that I can change later. I'm going to go with green. And before I go ahead with creating 2D patterns, I'm actually going to go ahead and give this guy a preset. Remember, the rigidity of this fabric is a slightly more than normal, let's say, t-shirt fabric. So we want to make sure that we pick something correct from the scratch. So the one that I tend to use is cotton heavy canvas. Has got some rigidity into it. If I go into the preset, you can see that we've got really high number of rigidity on this guy, which allows us to not to deal with so much bending and looseness of the fabric. That will take care of a lot of things. Of course, needless to say, once you set up your fabric, you always need to go in here and change your bending attribute to make sure that everything looks desirable and to your expectations. Now let's start with our fabric creation. I'm going to start with the patches. Remember the patches we looked at in the references. So we've got 6 patches. I'm going to go with 6. We can go with 5, with 4, with 8, but 6 I noticed that is the most common design. Let's start with that. So I'm just going to go and select a rectangle, and I'm going to click to get the create rectangle window and create a squarish type of window. So I'm just going to go with 97 to 100, something squarish, and press OK. And you can see it immediately gets the material from the hat MTL that we have created. All right, what I noticed is those patches are cone shape, so we need to create that cone in here. In order to do that, I will need to add a point in the middle. So I'm just going to select this guy right here with my edit pattern, go to edit point, right click on it, uniform split to 2, and that gives me a point in the middle. Again, we talked about all of these in our 2D pattern session, so if anything is strange to you, please watch that video, because I'm kind of pushing the pedal a little bit and assuming that you already have the knowledge. Next is for me to select this guy and hold down shift, so I'm following the straight line, and bring it to something like, I don't know, that. Again, these are the things that we can adjust later. By the way, I'm not seeing any numbers on these lines. Probably it will help you to follow along. So I'm just going to go in here and add or show line length. I'm going to enable that. Probably something useful you guys can benefit from. Now that allows me to create that curvature on the sides, and I do that with smooth curve. So selecting smooth curve and just drag on both sides, and there I have my cone shape patch, which is kind of similar to what we saw in the reference. I kind of noticed that it is a bit too big for the head. These are the decisions that we can make later. I'm just going to move this to something like 8, something like that. So it's not too small, it's not too big, and of course the tip is way too long as well. I'm just going to hold down shift and bring it down ever so slightly. Let's say 159.7, something like that. Again, chances are that we're not super accurate with it, so at the end of the day we need to make changes. That's fine. Now I need 6 of these guys. There are many ways of doing this, as you already know. I can do a symmetry, I can do mirror paste, but mirror paste is going to flip it. The one that I tend to use a lot is instance pattern. And the good thing about instance pattern is whatever change I make on one patch, it will apply it to the instance patterns as well. So I'm just going to go instance pattern, and for instance pattern you don't need to copy it, you just instance it, and then okay. And now if I go in here hypothetically and create and select one of these points, I can actually move one and the other one will follow. Excellent. So I need 4 more of these guys. So what I can do is to go in here, Control C, Control V, holding down Shift so the distance between them is correct, Control V. Now I have 4, I need 2 more, Control V, and for the last time Control V. Now there we have our 6 fabrics. I can kind of bring them here too. Again, the position of these guys is not really that important in 2D pattern window. It is important in 3D pattern window. Now the problem I have right now is, if you remember, we made an instance from this patch, that's why it turns blue, but we had to copy and paste these guys from the instance patch. So if I go in here and select one of these points, only this point has that connection to the original patch. How are we going to include the remaining 4 patterns is actually quite easy, and something that make your job a lot easier. You actually select all of them and then you right click on them, and under apply linked editing you again choose instance pattern. Now it's very similar to kind of grouping few objects in the scene. By selecting that tool, you're telling Marvelous Designer that I want all of these guys to be an instance of the very first patch, which is this one. Now you can see when I select the original patch or source patch, if I may, all of them turning blue. And if I go and select edit pattern and select one of them, now all of them will follow. Excellent. That's exactly what I want. Now let's tweak their position in our 3D window. So I need 2 of them to be at front so they can get connected to the brim, 2 in the back and 1 in the side, total of 6. So let's get to it. Now that looks good. You can see how we're blocking out. At any point of time you can press 2 on your keyboard and look at things in the orthographic view. That's the front, and of course that's the 3/4, that's the side. I'm gonna stay in front and just zoom in. Would be a good time now to save your scenes and then we can continue. Now it's time to sew these patches. Before I sew the patches, I'm gonna select all of them and lower the particle distance. I get that question a lot actually. What does this particle distance do? If I go into, let's see if I can find it somewhere. I'm gonna go in here and select mesh. If I go to mesh, you can see the level of subdivision on each pattern, right? With everything selected, if I go lower to something like 10, you can see I'm getting a much denser subdivision. In a sense, you're adding resolution to your patches. The reason it says particle distance because each vertex has got a particle, and you're lowering the distance between each particle so the mesh gets denser and denser. Now be very careful with this, because if you bring it too low and your computer cannot handle that level of simulation, then obviously your scene is going to crash. A happy medium number that I do use a lot is 15. if you want a little bit more accuracy, of course, if your computer can handle it, 10 would be ideal. So for now, I'm just going to set that to 10. Just going to go in here to texture and continue. Now to sew, one way is to use segment sewing into the pattern window. You also have an option to use the very same tool set in a 3D window. The reason that in this particular case I preferred 3D over 2D, because for me it's a little bit too confusing what exactly is happening, what needs to be sewn into what. So that can be a bit of a trial and error. In here everything is super visual, and we can get that done easily. Now there is a tiny indentation here, so segment sewing means that you have to do this twice for each segment, whereas free sewing allows you to just go from top to bottom, and sew those two fabrics together. In that case, I'm just going to go with free sewing. So free sewing on 3D sounds fun. So click, drag all the way, double click to select the target patch, select, drag all the way, double click, and then you establish the sewing. Again, nothing is going to stop you from doing this in 2D pattern window. Definitely a faster approach, but again, it's visually clearer in my opinion to do it in 3D, at least for this particular example. I'm going to continue, double click and go around and sew them all together. Now it's done. Let's save our project one more time before we hit simulate and we continue. I'm just going to zoom in and press simulate. Now you can see that the hat is nicely fit. It's much better than I initially thought. You can always go ahead and tweak and see what sort of result you're getting. For now, I don't think I need too much tweaking at this stage. It looks quite fit, to be honest with you, and we'll see how we go. If I need a much looser or bigger hat, I can definitely do that, but for now that actually looks pretty good as my first try, being lucky, I guess. Just letting you know, at any point of time, if you feel like you need a little bit more fabric or less fabric, you don't need to go ahead and increase the scale of these patches. And this is a really nifty trick that I picked up over the years. If you select all of these patterns under simulation property, right under proper particle distance, we've got shrinkage weft and shrinkage warp, and decreasing or increasing this percentage gives you more or less fabric. This is really cool. Obviously you should not overdo it or put ridiculous numbers in there. It's very sensitive. For example, I go 95 and 95 and look how it shrunk the fabric. If I go 110 and 110, all of a sudden you get more fabric. This is really cool. I'm gonna go 96 with 96 probably, because I feel like that 95 that I put in gave me a really good result, and that really should do the trick, although maybe 100 wasn't too bad. I'm gonna go 97 and try to kind of pull things and get the result that I want. But again, these are the things that you can always change later, so I'm not really too worried about it right now. And in case if you're wondering what weft or warp is, these are all the vertical or horizontal lines that you see in the fabric They actually called weft or warp. You probably know that. I didn't. So that allows you to shrink or grow the fabric using the percentage without manipulating the actual 2D pattern in the 2D pattern window. All right, with that out of the way, let's create the brim for the hat. So let's go to the next chapter. Now let's focus on the brim. Now the brim, you may have noticed, and we already talked about this, it's going to be length, almost the length of 2 patches that we have, right? So the patches that we have are 97. So 97 times 2, it's going to be around 194. Again, it's okay if you're not that accurate with all the dimensions, but again, I try to be as accurate as possible. So I'm just going to go in here and put in 194, I believe it was, and the height can be, I don't know, maybe 50, and the height can, you know, you can change that whenever, however you want. That's okay. Immediately I'm gonna go in here and basically move that to position just to have a better visual kind of understanding of what's going on. Now I'm just gonna go in here, select this guy, move it a little bit down, and let's give this the curvature that this brim needs. You can add a point right in the middle and then drag that point out. You can definitely do that, but I'm gonna go to edit curvature and just push that one out. Maybe 205 should do the trick. 205, and then I'm gonna use the same value, 205, something like that. Oh, it's 203. Again, it doesn't matter really. I feel like this is a bit too small, so I'm just going to go to edit pattern and just select this segment and extend that, holding down shift. I don't want to sort of deviate from it, something like that. Yeah, that's more like it. And of course the corners are very, very angular, and we already know how to fix that. Smooth curve and moving this one out. I'm trying to use the same number again, 33.3. Interesting number, 33.3. So everything looks sort of mirrored and identical both sides. You don't want one side to be noticeably different compared to the other side. Also, I noticed that there's not much curvature. I really would like to have a curvature in here, and that allows this brim to hold its shape, I noticed. So I'm just going to select that, zoom in a little, so I'm looking at what I'm doing. Just ever so slightly use that Bezier for the curve, for the point, to kind of shape this better. I can even select this middle point with edit curvature, pull this down ever so slightly to get an even harsher curvature. Now that curvature, you can tweak that later, but I noticed that this allows for a much better deformation. Also, one thing to be mindful of is I really would like to have a different material for the brim, because the rigidity of the brim is quite different compared to the body or the main part of the hat. So let's create a fabric. Even better, I'm just going to delete unused. Let's duplicate. So I'm just going to copy what I have and delete copy one and call this one brim. That's better. And now we know that if we want to specify slightly different material properties, we can easily target brim and not have an impact on the hat material that we already have. Now it's time to sew. A few things that we need to be mindful of. Again, we talked about this. This brim will be sewn into these two patches, but also to this part of the third patch on the left and a little bit of, let's say, 20% overlap on the other side of the hat. So we need to make sure that this is happening. Another thing that we need to be mindful of, because we're going to add points or insert points on these patches, we need to make sure they're not linked, because at the moment they're instance of each other, if you remember. And if we make changes on one, then we're making changes on all of them. In other words, if you put a point on one of them, all of them will get that point, which is not something that I want. So I'm just going to select all of them. I'm going to go into remove linked editing. So they're not instance anymore. We honestly don't care, because we use that to make sure that the shape is correct at any point of time. With those selected, you can right click and go instant pattern and link them again. But for now, we do not want them to be linked. All right, let's start with adding points. I'm going to select this pattern right here. Basically, the segment, the point is going to be inserted here. So I'm just going to click here, using this blue dot to navigate, or to rather locate where I should put that point, is very helpful and important. I'm going to go into add point split, and when you have everything selected, this tool can really mess up your workflow. So what I usually do, I'm going to deselect everything, and only then I'm going to go to add point split line and right click, and let's say I'm going to pick a value, let's say 20 millimeters, something like that. That looks correct actually to me. I'm going to go do the same thing. Let's say I want to put the point here. So let's see which patch it is. I'm going to go and deselect, and then select my add point, right click, and then put in the same value, 20. Now I have the point here, which is here. Now I've got the 2 points that I need on the main cap. Let's go and insert them on the brim as well. So right click, and I believe it was 20. I have it here, and on the other side, right click and 20 on that as well. Now I need one in the middle so I can connect the points to the actual fabrics as well. So right click and unified split 2 2, so I have one in the middle, and okay, that's good. Now I have these two for the two sides and these two segments for the main two patterns. Let's start with sewing. It really doesn't matter if you do it in 2D or 3D. I'm gonna go and do a simple segment sewing. So a little bit of offset here to a little bit of offset there. Keep an eye on your sewing, make sure they're not reversed, otherwise right click reverse, click, click, sounds good, and then click, click, sounds good, and the offset part, click, click, that looks good. Again, I'm looking at it here and there is no reversed stitching happening, so my sewing looks pretty cool. No problem there. And again, if at any point of time sewing is something that you do not understand, definitely watch my sewing tutorial. I have the entire video just dedicated to different types of sewing, so on and so forth. All right, this looks good. I'm just going to select the fabric itself. We do not want to forget about particle distance. Particle distance to 10 gives us a much better resolution. Maybe I'm actually going to reduce this ever so slightly to something like 8, and for shrinkage width, I think we picked 97. I'm just gonna stay with 97. Let's see actually how it looks before I get ahead of myself, and then we make changes, cosmetic changes to this once we identify problems. And there's always something in there that you guys need to be mindful of, but for now I'm just going to bring it to the position ever so slightly, just help the application to sew everything. And let's go and save the project, and I'm going to simulate. Now this looks good. There are a few changes I would like to make. It's really loose. That's one thing I noticed, and you guys noticed it too. And also I want this to stay up a little. And that is the curvature that I talked about actually. So I'm immediately gonna go in there, select my edit pattern, select this guy and bring this down ever so slightly. I'm going to fix my tangents so those tangents are not looking too crazy. Probably going to select these guys and move them to have a little bit a longer brim. And let's look at the result. Yep, slightly better. Yep, getting a much better result. Now you can see this is a bit too curvy for my taste, and that's where I talked about physical properties in the material, and that's why we specified a separate material in here, so we can go ahead and just tweak this bending attribute that you see around this hat here. So let's go ahead and address that really quick. I'm just going to make minor changes because I feel like that this shape looks a bit odd. That's that, probably moving the hat down a little. That's better. So there is not much wrinkle going on, and we can take care of that in a second. Now select the brim, go all the way down, and you have some really useful properties, physical properties. The one that I use the most is bending weft and bending warp. With bending warp, I usually go all the way, and you can see in the simulation how quickly this changes its shape as soon as you change the bend warp. With bend weft, you can see how quickly you actually get a really cool looking design by minimizing the amount of bending that it's happening. Maybe, I don't know, 85, because I still would like to get a little bit of curve in there, not too much but not too little. Now this looks much better to me. I actually quite like that. There's not much wrinkle is happening. Again, you can move the hat down ever so slightly if you kind of want to, but for me that looks good. I'm going to save that, and let's talk about eyelets, and let's start adding to this very basic looking hat and just make it look better and closer to the reference that we observed. So let's go to the next chapter. Now, before we get to the eyelets, I was thinking that maybe we can do the button first. So it's basically a very straightforward process. We already did buttons in the previous session when we talked about top stitches, so should be very familiar to you guys. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I'm also going to add thickness to this. So you can see we do not have any thickness in here. It's basically paper thin. I'm going to select everything and go and put maybe, tell you what, maybe select the body of the hat and put 2, and for this guy I'm just gonna go 2.5, something like that. But again, we don't see it in the rendering, and the reason that we don't see it in the rendering because we have to go in here. So I'm gonna go in here and we go thick textured surface, click on that, and now you can see the thickness. Looks a bit, you can kind of relate to that. It looks a bit more realistic, for lack of a better word. So that's better. Now with the button, it's very easy, and you know how I work with buttons. I always add the button first and then create the button. So the newly created button will inherit the style and the color and the material, if I may. I'm gonna call this one hat btn. Make the color somewhat darker just to add a little bit of style into this. You can just make it the same color if you want. And most importantly, you need to select the style. Now, not exactly sure what style I can go for. Maybe snap rivet 6. At least from this angle, this looks quite similar to this, but we'll see how we go. Now, you already know that you can create a button using this tool here. I'm just going to go here and click, and I have my button. It's actually not too bad. Oops, I clicked twice. I'm going to select the move tool or select tool, move this down. You can turn off collision. Yeah, sometimes collision is good, sometimes it creates sliding. If you notice that this button is moving, then at any point of time you can just go in there and just enable collision if you want. I'm gonna go in here into thickness weight. Let's see if I put 15 and 10. No, that's actually way too small. I'm just gonna go back to something like that. I don't want to make it too big, to be honest with you. So maybe 17 and 20. Yeah, that's better. That's definitely better. I don't want this to pop or stand out from the distance, but it needs to be at the same time quite noticeable. So that should do the trick. There are other things to consider, other type of I don't know, specifications. For example, if you want to tweak the material, add texture, make it reflective, add opacity, so on and so forth, but we really don't need any of them. All right, that looks good. Let's move on and create the eyelet for our hat. Now let's get to the eyelets. Now, in case if you are not sure what an eyelet is, I'm talking about these tiny holes. So if I go in here, you can see the tiny hole that you have on the hat, and these guys are eyelets. So let's create them. First things first, I'm going to select all of these guys, and I'm going to go instance pattern because I want to make a hole and I would like to have it on all of them. I am gonna get an error though. This is an error. Why? Because if you remember, and I'm gonna get closer, we did modify this pattern. So this one has been modified because we inserted a point here, and we modified this one. We inserted a point here. So the rest of them are going to be an instance because they're untouched basically, but these two have been modified so they cannot be the instance of the source pattern anymore. So what we need to do is just to copy and paste whatever we do on those two as well. Let's not forget about that. Now, let's use an internal ellipse. I'm just going to zoom in, maybe around this area, click, and circumference, probably going to use 25. I'm looking at the reference, probably it's okay. I'm just going to zoom in. Yeah, that looks fine, and you can see immediately I'm getting this on the others as well. Before I copy that, I would like to offset it, so I'm just going to offset as an internal line, reverse, so maybe 3. Yeah, 3 should do the trick. It looks a bit too wide. 2.5 is good. All right, now we're talking. So maybe going in here, show line length, I can probably get rid of that. We really don't need that anymore. Now I'm gonna go to edit pattern and select both of these guys so I can copy and paste that. Control C, Control V, and going in here using the guidelines to align the pattern. Control V again, using these guidelines to align the pattern. That looks better. Okay, that's that. Now, probably what I need to do is to select these guys and to select the one that we just pasted and make a hole out of it. How? Convert to hole. As for the internal lines that we offsetted really quick, I can go in here and select them. So I'm going to select this one, going to select this one. That should do the trick. And simply I'm going to right click on it and go cut and sew. Now with that, we are going to kind of add a little bit of sort of detailing to that as well. Maybe bring it up a little so I can kind of get to see them. A good idea would be to just give this a different material. Again, totally optional. You can actually go ahead and select these guys and just go ahead in here and click on this assign material. Now, if I deselect, you can see you get a little bit of detailing in there. Now, you can see it looks a bit faceted, looks a little bit low res, and it's because of the particle distance. I'm gonna take that risk and bring it down to 5. It's a very low number, but it helps me to round this up. You don't need to do that if you think your computer cannot handle it, but just, you know, it makes this look slightly better if you have a close-up shot. All right, I'm seeing these internal lines as red lines. So I'm probably going to go in there and turn this internal line option off to see things better. All right, that's an eyelet done. Your hat is now have eyelet. You can go ahead and do all sorts of things with it. So for example, this is something common I've seen a lot, and you can see it in this reference as well. Some of these eyelets are a little bit reflective, so you can introduce a little bit of sort of metalness in there, make it look reflective. I don't know, whatever you fancy, really, there is no right or wrong way here. But let's end the eyelet creation section here and move on to the next chapter. Now it's probably a good time to talk about top stitching, but before I do that, I can see that, I don't know, for some odd reason I don't see these lines. It's a little bit annoying. I'm looking at my reference and it's quite visible, those seams, but I don't really see it here. There's a really nice trick that you can use to address it. I'm just going to right click on these guys and probably zoom in before I right click. Now right click, offset as internal line. I don't want that to be reversed. Maybe 1 distance. I just want that to be very close to the edge. And with those selected, I'm just going to right click and go cut and sew. With those selected, I'm just going to move that up. Now, what you can do to sort of really make the seams pop is to change the thickness. So probably for these guys, I'm just going to use 2.5. For these guys, I'm not sure what value I've been specified. I can just go 1.5. And now you can see I'm getting more of an indentation that is happening in here. If you think the gap is way too much, then go ahead and set that to 2. I'm just going to select them all because I feel like it was a bit too much. You can set that to 2 and sort of reduce the impact. This one is going to be probably 2.3. So it's not going to be as thick, but very noticeable for sure. Something that I would like to do and kind of looks better. just going to do a quick sim, see how everything looks, make the seams to straighten as well. Every now and then it would be a good idea to do that. I feel like there's a little bit of sheen going on in the hat and the brim, so I'm just going to kill that. Bring the roughness to 75, do the same thing for the brim, 75, so I don't get that glare, that reflection, because that's a bit annoying. Anyhow, yeah, seams do look visible now. I like that. Again, if you feel like at any point of time, if like it's too much, bring it down. I feel like it's it's a bit too much. I don't want that to be too visible. I'm gonna sim it again, and yeah, that's definitely better. It's not as noticeable, but it's there. That sort of little bit of hint is exactly what I'm looking for. All right, let's go to the super fun part where we add stitches to the hat and we wrap up this session. Of course, there's one last thing in there, and that is to kind of apply material and make everything look good, but we're almost towards the end. So see you in the next chapter. All right, let's add some custom stitches. It's actually fairly straightforward. We are going to go in here into top stitch. We dedicated an entire video on top stitching in this series, so definitely make sure to check it out. I'm just going to add a top stitch, just like the way that we approach adding buttons. We are going to add a top stitch, and I'm going to use the same color, just slightly probably brighter, something like that. Now, before I start with that, we need to start with our internal lines. So I'm going to start with the fabrics, zooming in just to see what's happening, and then go in here, offset as internal line, and then that is going to be the distance between the stitch and the edge of your hat. Probably I'm going to go with a little bit more offset, but again, you do have offset when you want to top stitch as well, so you have the offset value by millimeters, so that is not the only way to control that. I'm just going to go with 1.5. That should do the trick. Now these are the lines that you are going to select for top stitching. I'm going to go with the brim as well. Select, go to edit pattern, select here, 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 and here. And again, if you remember, I'm not sure if I can bring the reference, you can see we have quite a number of lines here. So these guys are fairly straightforward, only one top stitch, but this we usually have 3, 4, 5, 6. It really doesn't matter. But again, let's see how we go. So we have number of offsets. We can just go ahead with whatever offset we have in mind. I'm just going to bring them in a little bit. I don't know, maybe 4 should do the trick. Maybe. Now with those, we know how to cut them. Go to extend, trim, and to pattern outline. Now they're not going outside of your outline pattern, which makes it a lot easier for you to control the fabric. Now, the problem that we have is for top stitching, as you already know, hopefully, we need to have one continuous segment, and that's not the case here. We have these points, and that separates the top stitch and may create some seams that we don't want to see. So we go to edit pattern, holding down shift, make sure to select all of these buttons on the other side as well, and just convert that to a curve point. That allows you to have the same curve, but it's not the actual point. It's not going to break the top stitch. Now that makes the job a lot easier. Now let's select the segment top stitch tool and start clicking on these guys to create our top stitch. That's fairly straightforward. If I zoom in, we can now see the top stitch. I'm going to immediately go to the top stitch. So let's start with offset. So offset 3.2 is the default. I think it's way too much. Offset of 1 makes more sense. Length, I want to set it to something like 3, space to something like 2, something like that, and thickness to something like 1, so I can actually see what's happening. With the color, obviously, the color is way too off. I can go darker, I can go brighter, I can go slightly brighter. I'm going to move that to the side. Yeah, that should do the trick. If you go exactly the same color, that can be a little bit difficult to spot. So at the same time, I'm not going to go too far with this. So something like that should do, still around the same color. Don't want to get too excited, but that will do the trick. Now I'm going to do the same thing with these guys.
There will always be a place for you by my side.
That should do the trick for the top stitching. I'm actually quite happy with this. The cool thing about this top stitch is it's actually an object, so you can export it as an object and bring it into software packages, UV map it, and apply light to it. It can cast shadow on the fabric. So unlike the top stitching session that we all had where we used texture, the second mode is texture, this one is object, so a little bit of a variety that I thought we would give to this session. And yeah, the hat is coming along beautifully. Let's go to the very last session where we just add some custom made material, and then we call it a day. We wrap up this session. All right, to basically add a final touch to what we have, let's just apply a fabric texture to this. So we bring it one level closer to that realism that we want. So if I look at here, you can see that kind of fabric texture that we have with a little bit of bump or normal that adds to the realism. Totally something that you can do in other software packages like Blender or Maya or 3D Max, but why not knowing how to do that here as well? Because at the end of the day, if you wish to UV unwrap everything and retopologize everything and bring to ZBrush, you might as well want to have everything in one file and get things done properly. Now, for the purpose of this particular video, this is what I made. So basically it's a photo of a fabric, same color, and this is the UV map, which I will provide with this model, and that will be on my Patreon page. If you guys would like to follow along, you can simply go ahead and download this. I put the finished product on Patreon as well if you wish to download that, but let's get to it. Basically, that's the two images that I'm going to go with for hat and for the brim. For my particular case, I'm going to apply it to both of them. So for texture, and apply cap to the main part of the hat. Now the reason that it turns dark green, because the color is already set to green. So I need to bring this one back to white so I can set or see the accurate representation. For the texture and for the transformation, we've got just a crazy value here. Looks a bit unrealistic for the tiling. Let's see if that works. I'm just going to zoom in. Yeah, that looks a bit too much. So maybe 250 would be what we want. Yes, definitely that's the case. I'm going to do the same thing for the brim as well. Going into texture, use the same texture, bring the color to white. I believe I used 250, so I'm going to use 250 and 250, so we get the same material in there. You can use a normal map as well and go to transformation, 250, 250, and again intensity, if you want to bring it up, that's fine too. For the hat, I'm gonna do the same thing. That looks good. All right. Now, our job is done. What I do usually is I basically try to sort of increase the resolution anywhere or everywhere I can. So for example, with these tiny ones, I can even lower it to something like 3. For these guys, what do we have? 10, maybe I bring this down to 8. What do we have for these guys? 10 should do the trick. What about this guy? 8 should do the trick. So that's fine. I'm just going to go and sim it again. So every now and then make sure to sim your scene just to make sure and sanity check the process, make sure everything looks correct. And we can call this done. Let's just add one bonus section where I show you how to UV map this. So it's ready to go basically. If you want to export this into other software packages, you know how to UV map that as well. Okay, welcome to the very last chapter. I promise you that. So let's go to the UVs. So I'm going to go to UV editor. And you can see it's all over the place. I'm just going to right click and reset UVs to 2D arrangements. Then select everything. You can right click on it and just fit that UVs to 0 to 1 layout. It's very similar to the layout button that you see in softwares like software packages like Autodesk Maya. These are the patches. These are the patches for the actual main hat, and this is the brim, and that's what you need. So that takes us to the end of this tutorial. It's a bit longer than our usual 30-minute video, but I had a lot to squeeze into this video, and we explored new tricks. We did a recap on the previous tools that we use. So if you kind of feel a bit uncomfortable on certain tools that we used in this video, make sure to go back and start from the very first video in this series, and then this series will walk you through how we ended up here, where we just used tools effortlessly and we add to the complexity and to the realism of the final piece. I hope you found this video useful. Follow me on Twitter as well, where I talk about work in progress, new projects, exciting news, so on and so forth. And again, as usual, I'm very grateful, very thankful for your support. You can always support me on my Patreon page. I've got 3 tiers that you can follow. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Let me know in the description below in the chat how you go. And until the next video, see you guys soon.